Hello, how are you? Today we will try to cover about Daniel 2, prophecy of Daniel 2. Last time we taught you that prophecy of Daniel 2. We interpret some of the verses. Today we will tell you about part 3. So follow us about the fall of Babylon. In the first year of Neriglissar, only 2 years after the death of Nebuchadnezzar, that fatal war broke out between the Babylonians and the Medes, which resulted in the overthrow of the Babylonian kingdom. Cyrus, king of the Medes, who is called Darius in Daniel 5:31, summoned to his aid his nephew Cyrus of the Persian line. The war was prosecuted with uninterrupted success by the Medes and the Persian until in 18 years of Nabonidus, the third year of his son Belshazzar, Cyrus laid siege to Babylon, the only city in the entire east which then held out against him. The Babylonians gathered within their seemingly impregnable walls with provision on hand for 20 years and a land within the limit of their broad city, sufficient to furnish food for the inhabitants and garrisons for an indefinite period. They scoffed at Cyrus from their lofty walls and derided his seemingly useless effort to bring them into subjection. According to all human calculation, they had good ground for their feeling of security, never weighed in the balance of earthly probability. Could that city be taken with the means of warfare then known? Hence they breathed as freely and slept as soundly as though no foe were waiting and watching around their beleaguered walls. But God had decreed that the proud and wicked city should come down from her throne of glory. And when he speaks, what mortal arm can defeat his words? In their feeling of security lay the source of their danger. Cyrus resolved to accomplish by strategy what he could not do by force. Dreaming of the approach of an annual festival in which the whole city would be given up to mirth and revelry, he chose that day as the time to carry his purpose into execution. There was no entrance for him into that city unless he could find it where the rivers Euphrates entered and emerged as it passed under the walls. He resolved to make the channel of the river his highway into the stronghold of his enemy. To do this, the water must be turned aside from its channel through the city. For this purpose, on the evening of the feast day above referred to, he detailed one body of soldiers to turn the river at a given hour into a large artificial lake a short distance above the city, another to take their station at the point where the river entered the city, and a third to take position 15 miles below, where the rivers emerged from the city. The two latter military groups were instructed to enter the channel as soon as they found the rivers fordable, and in the darkness of the night explore their way beneath the walls and press on to the palace of the king, where they were to surprise and kill the guards and capture or slay the kings. When the water was turned into the lake, the river soon became shallow enough to ford, and the soldier followed its channel into the heart of the city of Babylon. But all this would have been in vain had not the whole city given itself over on that eventful night to the most abandoned carelessness and presumption, a state of things upon which Cyrus calculated largely for the carrying out of his purpose. On each side of the river, through the entire length of the city, were walls of a great height and of equal thickness with the outer walls. In this wall were huge gates of brass, which when closed and guarded debarred all entrance from the river bare to any of the streets that crossed the river, had the gates been closed at this time. The soldiers of Cyrus might have marched into the city along the river's bed, and then marched out again for all that they would have been able to accomplish toward the subjection of the place. But Lord had spoken, and in the darkness rivalry of that fatal night, these river gates were left open, as had been foretold by the prophet Isaiah years before in these words. Thus says the Lord to his anointed, to Cyrus, whose right hand I have holden, subdue nations before him. And I will loose the loins of the kings, to open before him the two-leaved gates, and the gates shall not be shut. Isaiah 45:1. The entrance of the Persian soldier was not perceived. Many a check would have paled with terror had the sudden going down of the river been noticed, and its fearful import understood. Many a tongue would have spread wild alarm through the city, had the dark forms of armed foe been seen stealthily threading their way to the citadel of their supposed security. But no one noticed the sudden subsidence of the water of the river. No one saw the entrance of the Persian warriors. No one took care that the river gates should be closed and guarded. No one cared for aught but to see how deeply and recklessly he could plunge into the wild debauch that night's dissipations cost the Babylonians their kingdom and their freedom. They went into their brutish rivalry, subjects of the king of Babylon. They awoke from its slave to the king of Persia. The soldiers of Cyrus first made known their presence in the city by falling upon the royal guard in the vestibule of the palace of the king. Belshazzar soon became aware of the cause of the disturbance and died fighting for his life. This feast of Belshazzar is described in the 5th chapter of Daniel, and the scene closes with the simple record: in that night was Belshazzar the king of the Chaldeans slain, and Darius the Median took the kingdom, being about 62 years old. The historian predicts, say, Darius the Median, that is Cyrus, the uncle of Cyrus, took the kingdom, for Cyrus allowed him the title of all his conquests as long as he lived. Thus, the first empire, symbolized by the head of a gold, that means on the great image of that means Daniel, came to an ignoble end. It would naturally be supposed that the conqueror, becoming possessed of so noble a city as Babylon, far surpassing anything else in the world, would have taken it as the seat of his empire and maintained it in its splendor. But God had said that the city should become a heap and the habitation of the beast of the desert, that its house should be full of doleful creatures, that the wild beasts of the island should cry in its desolate dwellings, and the dragons in its pleasant palace. Isaiah 13 19 up to 22. It must first be deserted. Cyrus established a second capital at Susa, a celebrated city in the province of Elam, east from Babylon, on the bank of the river Chospis, a branch of the Tigris. This was probably done in the first year of his sole reign. The pride of the Babylonians being particularly provoked by this act. In the 5th year of Darius Hystaspes, 517 BC, they rose in rebellion and brought upon themselves against the whole strength of the Persian Empire. The city was once more taken by strategy. Darius took away the brazen gates of the city and beat down the walls from 200 cubits to 50 cubits. This was the beginning of its destruction. By this act, it was left exposed to the ravages of every hostile band. Cyrus, on his return from Greece, plundered the temple of Belus of its immense wealth, and then laid the lofty structure in ruins. Alexander the Great endeavored to rebuild it, but after employing 10,000 men 2 months to clear away the rubbish, he died from excessive drunkenness and debauchery, and the work was suspended. In the year 294 BC, Seleucus Nicator built the city of New Babylon in the neighborhood of the old city, took much of the material and many of the inhabitants of the old city to build up and people the new. Now almost exhausted of inhabitants, neglect and decay were telling fearfully upon the ancient capital. The violence of Parthian prince hastened its ruin. About the end of the 4th century, it was used by the Persian kings as an enclosure for wild beasts. At the end of the 12th century, according to a celebrated traveler, the few remaining ruins of Nebuchadnezzar's palace were so full of serpents and venomous reptiles that they could not be closely inspected without great danger, and today scarcely enough even of the ruins is left to mark the spot where once stood the largest and richest and proudest city of the ancient world. Thus, the ruins of Great Babylon show us how accurately God fulfills His word and make the doubt of skepticism appear like willful blindness. After you shall arise another kingdom inferior to you. The use of the word kingdom shows that kingdoms and not particular kings are represented by the different parts of this image. Hence, when it was said to Nebuchadnezzar, "Thou art this heat of gold," although the personal pronoun was used, the kingdom, not the king himself, was meant. In our next session, we will prepare, that means with the will of God, about Medo-Persian kingdom. That means in our part 4, we will prepare, that means about Medo-Persian kingdom, about Daniel 2. So follow us until the end, O children of Israel, O children of Ham, Sam, and Japheth. Follow us. That means we will tell you also the present kingdom. That means, and we will interpret and end. That means Daniel's 2.
So until the end, follow us and give us comment. Thank you for your listening.